Good evening, everyone. I'm super excited to welcome you here at Fancy Live Studio of 21st edition of Korea Film Festival Mezipatra. It's already a 6th day of streaming, but maybe you are here for the very first time. For the very first time, you are watching us streaming. So let me just briefly inform you that we are having discussion every day from 6 p.m. and we are having Q&As and discussion with other important personalities for queer communities, so don't forget to tune in tomorrow as well. And when it comes to for today's program, we will start with a Q&A with the director of Saint Narcissus, of a Canadian feature film which is competing for the main award. And later on, we will continue with discussion with creators of Czech series Trans. But before that, let me just quickly inform you that the first program, the Q&A, will be held in English. So if you need Czech translation, please go to visit our YouTube channel. Then you will hear automatically Czech translation. No funny stuff, no tricky stuff, but if you're okay with English version, stay with us on Facebook. Very well, I think we are all set. I am super excited that we can start with a Q&A and that I can welcome here virtually a queer icon, the legend of queer filmmaking and art, Canadian artist Bruce LaBruce. Hello, Bruce.
Hey, hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It is lovely to see you again after 4
Thank
years,
you.
actually. Because you were with us already in 2016 as a part of the main jury, and back then we also screened your cult movie Hassawai from '96. So maybe we could start from there, and if you can share with us a little bit about how the condition changed during these past 20, 30 years, because you already made 11 films, so I believe that you experienced some major changes in the field.
Sure. I started making Super 8 films in the late 80s. And let me just yeah. And it was very no budget filmmaking. It was underground filmmaking. I started on Super 8 and then moved up to 16 millimeter. But I went through the whole transition from film to digital and from pre-internet to like post-internet. So I started out making fanzines, queer punk fanzines, and Super 8 movies, which were which we just mailed around by snail mail, and slowly distributed our films any way we could. So I've gone through a huge change in terms of adapting to the digital world and gradually making bigger and bigger budget films and adapting to digital filmmaking but I started out making pornographic films, and I still make porn as well. So between feature films, I still work for porn companies like Erica Lust and Cocky Boys, and make what I consider really interesting porn art.
And do you think that it's easier to make films nowadays, that maybe the technical equipment is more accessible, that basically anyone can make a film on a phone?
Absolutely. And anyone can be a porn star now. Everyone is a porn star now, with OnlyFans and these kinds of sites where you make your own porn for for subscribers. So yeah, both art and porn have become completely democratized,
Mm-hmm.
and which is good. I also work in the film industry itself, which also has there's good parts of it, of that world, and bad. But Erica Lust, for example, is making very feminist, queer
Mm-hmm.
porn,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot. My My producer has produced a lot of my films, Jürgen Bruning. He started the first ever foreign film festival in Berlin. And the work that they show there is very progressive. It's very queer. It shows all sorts of different body types, and he shows a lot of trans porn, a lot of polyamorous porn, whatever, of a very eclectic, very diverse, racially diverse, etc. So that's the good part of it being democratized. It isn't so univocal. It's not so monolithic. There's a lot of room for a lot of different people. And I've always believed that pornographers are artists. I mean, anyone who creates a fiction out of nothing, well, is with actors is a filmmaker. There's a lot of bad artists, but it's a lot of good porn. But then I also, I make these larger budgeted films like Gerontophilia and Saint Narcissus, which are not sexually explicit, but they still have to do with controversial subject matter, like Gerontophilia. It was intergenerational love, and in Saint Narcissus it's incest and twin incest.
And maybe we can go back to the very beginning of this project, and maybe you can tell us what was the first idea, what was the initial idea? Were you interested in a twincest, an incest, or maybe you started to, like, with the idea that you wanted to make a film about narcissism? Or maybe both?
Yeah, the working title was twincest, and I was fascinated by the idea of twincest, but there was also like a subgenre of porn called twincest. So I thought I would make a movie about it, and then it occurred to me that it would be a great opportunity to investigate the theme of narcissism through this idea of twincests and twins. So so I kind of adapted it to the Narcissus myth. It's a loose retelling of the Narcissus myth, and it has a kind of a fairy tale quality. It's like the movie is like a melodrama fairy tale. I said it in the early 1970s because, narcissism is like the default sensibility now. Everyone seems to be, fixated by their own image and constantly using the cell phone as a little mirror that they're constantly gazing at themselves. And there's a lot of solipsism and kind of like people really falling in love with their own image, and and not only that, but like kind of self-absorption in general, like being very self-absorbed with their own problems, their own circumstances. So if I'd said it in today's world, a film about a character who's obsessed with himself, nobody would probably no one would probably notice, But so I said it in the early 70s. So this guy, before smartphones, obviously. So this guy is like taking Polaroids of himself all the time, and it seems very bizarre. It seems like very bizarre behavior, because as Irene, the character in the movie, says, he only takes pictures of himself. Who does that? Who does that? And it's like, well, now everybody does that. Every single person does that.
And are you a selfie type of person when you are mentioning it?
Not so much, no. I mean, I came, although, when we started our fanzines in the early 90s, in the mid 80s, we were doing what social media does now, but on a much smaller scale and a much more, and we were a very, very small minority of people who were producing these fanzines. That's where I learned how to do everything. I mean, photography, writing short fiction, collage,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
writing manifestos, um, making short films, etc. So, um, but the and layout, like laying out the fanzine design. So but it was also like just a way of expressing ourselves, taking pictures of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
writing manifestos, what we believe, um, personal stories, and publishing them, and then sending them off to around the world. But it was just this very slow process where it
Mm-hmm.
would take
Mm-hmm.
it would take months to get a response back from people, and we'd
Mm-hmm.
only produce 100 fanzines or 200 in the beginning. So, but it really was kind of like uh, the same phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
as media, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not on a mass scale.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, you know, I did used to appear in my own movies and print a lot of photographs of myself and stuff, but it didn't quite have the same
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, kind of uh, narcotic aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now it
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's an addiction for everyone. It's like and it's also very corporate. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a corporate environment or these are corporations that control um, social media, whereas we were completely independent and you know
Mm-hmm.
no advertising.
And when you started to developing the script, because it seems to me that in some ways this new feature of yours has some similar topics as in your previous film, The Misandrist, like
Mm-hmm.
the lesbians living in the wild and nuns and monks and maybe like orthodoxy and so on. So maybe there was a part-time working on these two films together, or maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they definitely overlapped. I
Mm-hmm.
started um, writing Saint Narcissus right after Gerontophilia, so I guess 2013, 2014.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the problem, it was totally financed by Quebec, governmental agencies, so
Mm-hmm.
Quebec Telefilm and Sodec. And, those processes take a very, very long time. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a long process of developing the script with my co-writer Martin Girard,
Mm-hmm.
um, and sometimes you have to apply several times before you're successful. So it took us really like 5 or 6 years before we were able to shoot it. So and that's partly why I continued to make short films, porn films between
Mm-hmm.
features.
Mm-hmm.
But I did sneak in another feature there, The Misandrist, which was very low budget, but I really needed to keep creative. And so a lot of The Misandrist is also a kind of a sequel to my film, The Raspberry Reich,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
almost like a lesbian version of The
Sure.
Raspberry Reich.
Uh-huh.
But but it also has some of the same themes and references
Mm-hmm.
from Saint Narcissus.
And was it challenging to cast the main role of Dominic?
Initially, when I thought it might be a little more sexually explicit, we were looking for actual twins to cast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But but then the script got more ambitious and we got more money than we expected. So I decided to make more of an independent feature film with good actors. So it was really impossible to find, really good twin actors who would also be intimate with each other on screen.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to go with the with one actor playing both twins, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
looked at quite a few people. I looked at maybe 15 or 20 actors, and Felix Antoine, he just had, first of all, physically the look. He had this kind of classical beauty that the role requires, because it's based on a Greek myth, and he's like supposed to be this, you know, if you're going to play Narcissus, you better be pretty good looking, I would say, in a classical way, and especially when it's told in the style that I'm doing, which is very romantic and kind of classical, and but also he was just very open to the idea of the theme, which is two kind of controversial themes for him. One is the twincest angle, and the other one is the relationship he has with the priest, right? With the demented priest, which is kind of a challenging role to take on, because I wanted to present that relationship as it's very difficult to understand when people are sexually exploited in that manner. They have very ambivalent feelings about the person who's exploiting them, and if they're it's partly Stockholm syndrome and partly that they're kind of brainwashed, or they're kind of they're in a very cloistered environment where they don't have any objectivity, so they don't really understand the inappropriateness of what is going on. So the sexual and romantic even relationship that he's developed with this priest, which also has a S&M angle, a domination and submission kind of violent angle. He doesn't recognize how exploitative it is. So for him, it's like he almost feels like this priest is his father lover. It's like another form of incest. I mean, that's the other thing about the film. There's about 4 different kinds of implied incest going on. The one between the twins, and then the one between the Dominique's mother and the mother, Beatrice, the Earth Mother. She's having the relationship with her dead lover's daughter. So even though she kind of is acting as her mother, she's also in an implied intimate sexual relationship with her. And then you have the father-son, Andrew and Daniel. And then you have, Dominique and Irene are kind of almost like brother and sister because of the relationship. And, there's the scene where Dominique, Irene's trying to kiss Dominique, and Dominique goes, I guess that makes us, I guess we are brother and sister in a way. And Irene says, but we're not, are we? And then tries to kiss him, So the movie's really about exploring exactly what the incest taboo is, and why some people you might say that twincest is the most understandable and least objectionable form of incest, because most people can understand why two people who look identical and have this close psychic relationship would be sexually attracted to one another. I mean, it's like making love to your mirror image almost. And it's interesting to me that the relationship, for example, between Beatrice and Irene is technically not illegal or deemed incest, but it has incestuous implications, So it also has to do with the social contract and what is deemed appropriate and what isn't, and whether you're raised with someone and that thus in a very familiar kind of role with them. But if you're not, then does that kind of taboo disappear somewhere?
And why did you decide to set the story in the 70s? Because you're making reference to like current situation, but you're also going back to Greek mythology and so on. So why 70s?
Yeah, partly it was, as I said, if I'd said it now, uh, the idea of some of them being totally fixated and self-absorbed wouldn't seem unusual. So I said it in the 70s to make it stand out
Mm-hmm.
in stark relief to everyone else. Um, but also the film is kind of a tribute to, this early 70s was free love was still happening, the sexual revolution. And
Mm-hmm.
so these characters are kind of perhaps more openly sexual according to the times. Um, it's also my favorite period of filmmaking in
Mm-hmm.
America is the late 60s and 70s, because there was so much questioning of conventions going on, questioning of the both social conventions of the time and conventions of filmmaking were being challenged. And um, so there's films. I was referencing films like The Fox with Sandy Dennis,
Mm-hmm.
based on a D.H. Lawrence story, and Robert Altman's Images, and Brian De Palma's Carrie, and not Carrie, sorry, Obsession and Sisters, another kind of twin movie. Obsession is a incest movie,
Mm-hmm.
be, implied between father and daughter. So um, I wanted to make a film that was an homage to the films of
Mm-hmm.
that era. And at the same time in Canada, it was the same kinds of films were being made. Like
Mm-hmm.
Paul
Mm-hmm.
Almond, this Quebec filmmaker, Paul Almond, who was married to Geneviève Bujold, and they did 3 films together from that era, Isabel, The Act of the Heart, and Journey. And those films are also like these kind of spooky films
Mm-hmm.
about incest. And I mean, in Act of the Heart, which was made about the same year as my movie set it made in Montreal, Donald Sutherland plays a priest who has sex with a young girl on the altar of the church,
Mm-hmm.
played by Geneviève Bujold. And then she goes to the park and pours gasoline over herself and sets herself on fire at the end of the movie. So when I saw a movie like that as a kid on Canadian television, I was like, what the WTF? What's going on? This is insane. This kind of psychosexual kind of madness that
Mm-hmm.
and passion that has a mix between religious
Mm-hmm.
and sexual and taboo,
Mm-hmm.
and it really blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it remains one of my favorite Canadian films. So, we were, we hired like people that are film that worked in that era. So my cinematographer Michel Laveau has worked with a lot of great classical
Mm-hmm.
Quebec directors like Michel Brault and Claude Jutra and Francis Mankiewicz. So we actually tried to do the film stylistically in a very similar way by
Mm-hmm.
using and shooting it through the camera, not by using post-production.
Mm-hmm.
So the lenses we used, the lighting kit we used, and everything was all that was done
Mm-hmm.
in the camera. And also for the special effects, we tried to use as little CGI as
Mm-hmm.
we could. Use kind of classical analog effects like body doubles and split screens.
Mm-hmm.
There's only about 7 or 8 CGI like face replacement shots, and the rest are all done but old school. So I really was interested in capturing that era.
Mm-hmm. And if you would compare it with your previous film, is there any way or any area in which this film differs from your previous work? Maybe in terms of the realization, you mentioned some of the technical stuff you've made. Maybe they were more expensive than when you were working on the Misandrist.
Oh, Misandrist for sure. I mean, Gerontophilia was my first $1 million movie,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to, in such crass terms. And
Mm-hmm.
and then Misandros went way back to like, it only cost like, oh, I don't know, 100,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one is now, my most expensive budget to date. So it did give me an opportunity to do quite a few things visually that I'd never had, the opportunity, never had the range of equipment, and we had a really great camera and lenses and everything. So I was able to do stuff visually that I'd never done before. I'd never done this kind of special effects before, which I just kind of learned as I went along, but that was very challenging and fun. And I don't know, just working, the script is much more straightforwardly narrative, and it's one of those movies where it's very plot driven, so that the audience is involved in trying to figure out the plot twists and what's going to happen next. And so the plot is very carefully engineered to make certain reveals at certain times, and so we did spend a lot of time on the script, so that for the audience who know my work, it's more kind of classical narrative experience.
And did anyhow pandemic affected your work on this film, or you were ready before spring and you wasn't affected at all?
With COVID? Fortunately, it was completely shot. So when the first lockdown happened in March, we were halfway through post-production. So we did have to stop post-production for 2.5 months. And then it opened back up enough that we could continue with the safety regulations. And we managed to finish it in time for the Venice Film Festival, which was in September. And then we were extremely lucky with that, because things seemed to be, the COVID numbers were very low, both in Canada and in northern Italy. So we were able, so my producer, Nicolas Comeau, and Felix Antoine Duval, the main actor, and I were able to go to Venice for the premiere at Venice Days. And so it was really, it was like a dream, because of course we had to, be tested before we left and when we landed, and, wear masks and all that. But everyone, it was like still summer, and it was all outdoor dining, and we had lovely dinners and cocktail receptions, and an audience, even if it was less than usual, it was still like 300 or 400 people. And and the ambassador of the Canadian ambassador to Italy came from Rome for the premiere, and so we had it was good for Felix, the actor. I was glad, because he worked so hard in the film, and he worked really hard. He had a dialect coach and a acting coach for the twins, and he took motorcycle lessons and blah blah. So I really wanted. He really dedicated himself. So I was glad that he's a Quebec TV star, but he's never been in a feature film. So it was his first big glamorous world premiere. So and then we came home and everything started locking down again.
Well, it's well, sadly here in Czech Republic we cannot go to the cinema. Everything's locked, so we are forced to watch films at home at small screen. Do you think that we are at some like a breaking point, that we are experiencing, I do not want to say such a strong word as death of a classical cinema, or like a classical mode of watching films, but do you think it can negatively affect the way how the films will be made? Maybe more adjusted to smaller screen, maybe the storytelling will have to be quicker, or so on?
I don't know about quicker, but because you still have all this TV long form. In fact, I think that the whole advent of people being addicted to TV series, you know, Netflix and HBO and all that stuff, it's really it's kind of it's not a cinematic experience. It's more like a narcotic experience. And quite often I'll see a series and I'll watch 10 episodes and I'll say they really could have made that into a 2-hour movie, you know. That could have been a 2-hour movie. They could have drawn it out. Occasionally it's the other way around, where you see a movie and you say, oh, that should have been a miniseries because there was so much going on, you know. But well, I mean, I think COVID has accelerated what was already happening, obviously. I mean, there was already this move to the smaller screen, to streaming, and so it's not that shocking in a way that it's happening. I really still do think that that cinema was designed for to be a shared experience, and that there's something about watching it on a enormous screen, a kind of a spectacle that's bigger than life. You know, the screen acts is almost like something, in Freudian terms, almost, that people project everything on their own fantasies, their own, you know, life, and the scale of it, and the communal experience are unique, and so I would be very upset if that experience disappeared completely. But I think already, you know, with Missandras, for example, I was shocked that it actually played at more cinemas in the US than any of my other movies, even though it was kind of a bit of an obscure film for me, because there's so many art house cinemas now. It played in like 28 cities in New York for like a week or a 2-week run, and it was almost all these small art house cinemas that every city seems to have now, which was a very encouraging, because I think it'll be preserved either as blockbusters or as kind of this boutique kind of like experience where it's appealing to people's not only nostalgia but also their like what I was just talking about, this idea that it's a communal experience. It's something that has to be seen on a bigger scale, and it's also just it's a social it's a social experience that was always so nice, because, you know, it was 2 hours. The films were 2 hours for a reason, you know. It's about people going and having an experience, and getting out of the house and hiring a babysitter or whatever, you know. It's like, one thing that worries me about everything going streaming is that, and the whole thrust of COVID as well, is that it's not encouraging people to go out of their house. I mean, it's like it's kind of a imposed, either self-imposed or imposed kind of isolation, you know, and I don't think that isolation is particularly healthy.
Well, unfortunately, our time is quickly coming to the end. So just like to wrap it up, you're a cinema hall type of person, and if you would have to pick up, you will choose cinema hall and not your comfortable sofa at your home watching alone the film. You prefer to share
both.
it.
I like both. I like both, but I wouldn't want it to be only on the couch. Yeah.
So let's hope we will be able to share our experiences with strangers. It doesn't matter, but that we will be able to watch film properly at the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an energy shared between people in a cinema. You know, it has to do with the zeitgeist. It has to do with like what people are, how they're processing, you know, culture. You can read, you can learn so much about what's going on in the world by watching a movie with an audience and how they're responding to that movie.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us today and talking with us. It was lovely to see you again, and hopefully we will meet each other virtually, but it would be better that it would be in person.
Yeah, I will be back eventually.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
So the first Q&A is over, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But don't forget, we will continue tomorrow with another Q&A from 6 p.m. This time with one of the filmmakers whose short is being shown in the blog of short films Torn from the Chain. And in a moment, Stepan Bukáček will talk with Ondřej Moučka, who is the organizer of the official festival Echoes at Olomouc. So stay tuned. But before we will go to that, and I just wanted to know that this part of program will be in Czech only. But before that, let's watch our beautiful jingle one more time.